Today, we're going to dive into a modern parable that I think might just hit a little close to home for some of us. It's a story called Elias, Cross, and the Stepping Stones. And really, it's for anyone who's ever felt like they're climbing that ladder of success, only to get to the top and realize it's been leaning against the completely wrong wall. And it all kicks off with a question that, I think most of us have probably asked ourselves at some point. Seriously, have you ever felt that? You're doing everything right. You're checking all the boxes. Your calendar looks like a monument to productivity. On paper, you're a total success. But then, when all the noise dies down at the end of the day, there's this other feeling, a kind of quiet ache, a hollowness that all that success just can't seem to fill. Well, that is exactly where we meet the main character of our story. Meet Elias Cross. I mean, this guy has it all, right? He's got incredible discipline, a business that's thriving, just unstoppable momentum. But here's the problem. Every single win, every achievement just makes that inner emptiness feel louder. He's standing on the very stones that are supposed to be lifting him up, but instead he just feels like he's tripping over them.
What's so powerful about this story is that it doesn't start with some huge dramatic ambition. It starts with a feeling that is so universal: misalignment. It's that subtle, nagging sense that your body, your mind, and your spirit, they're just not in sync. It's like they're all playing from a different sheet of music.
And this really gets to the core of his problem. See, Elias was an absolute master of motion. His life was this perfectly conducted symphony of schedules, goals, checklists, you name it. But he was making a huge mistake. He was confusing all that activity, all that busyness for actual progress. He was moving incredibly fast, sure, but he wasn't moving any closer to what he really wanted, which was fulfillment and a sense of peace. And then one day, driving in his car, just a tiny fragment of a sermon on the radio cuts through all that mental noise. It's such a simple question, but for Elias, man, it hits him like a lightning bolt. And he has this sudden, jarring realization. He knows exactly where he is on a map, he knows exactly where he is in his career, but he has absolutely no clue where he is spiritually. And that right there, that's the turning point. So, what's the first step he takes? Well, it's not what you'd think. He doesn't add another habit to his to-do list or set a new goal. Nope, he subtracts. He decides to remove the one thing that has been the constant soundtrack to his entire adult life: the noise. And you have to understand, this was a radical, almost terrifying decision for him. I mean, just imagine it for yourself. No phone first thing in the morning, no emails, no music, not even a devotional podcast before the sun comes up. Just quiet. In the world we live in, that can feel like suffocating. And for him, at first, that's exactly what it felt like. His mind was so used to being stimulated, it just fought against the stillness. And this brings up a really crucial question, doesn't it? What actually happens in that space when you stop trying to fill every quiet moment and instead just face the silence? What do you find in there? Well, in that deeply uncomfortable stillness, a familiar line of scripture suddenly becomes a profound personal revelation. It's not just a nice verse on a coffee mug anymore. For him, it feels like a direct invitation. And that quiet ache, that hollowness that had been haunting him, it starts to feel less like a punishment and more like a homing signal, gently guiding him back toward alignment. But look, choosing silence is one thing. Actually defending it from the world, that's a whole other battle. And this next part of the story is all about the trials Elias faced. And honestly, they're perfect metaphors for the challenges that every single one of us faces in this modern world. He steps into what the story calls the desert of distraction. And by experimenting with a digital fast, he comes to this really bitter realization. He's an addict. Not to a substance, but to the constant drip, drip, drip of information, notifications, and updates. He finally sees that distraction has become the new anesthesia for the soul. It's what we use to numb ourselves from our own lives. This leads him to this brilliant, totally modern idea he calls spiritual cybersecurity. I mean, think about it, right? We have all this complex software to protect our laptops, we guard our passwords with our lives. But what are we doing to protect our own minds? He realizes we have to start guarding what we let into our minds with that exact same level of vigilance. So how does all this junk get in? The story says it's through the 5 gates. Our senses, they're the ports of entry. It's through what we watch, what we listen to, and what we consume that the world installs its programming, its values, its anxieties, right into our minds. And Elias learns that guarding these gates isn't just a good idea, it's absolutely essential for staying in alignment. Okay, so All of these trials, embracing the silence, battling distraction, this idea of spiritual cybersecurity, it's all been leading him somewhere. His whole journey is starting to crystallize into a really clear, really actionable framework. Just one simple number. But this number represents the very foundation that Elias had been missing his entire life. And this isn't some theory from a book. This is a structure that was born out of pure necessity and his own lived experience. And here they are, the 5 stepping stones. It all begins with self-control. That's the core discipline to actually guard those 5 gates we just talked about. Number 2 is spirit, which is all about reconnecting through that intentional silence. Then you have diet and fitness, which are about treating your body not as an afterthought, but as a sacred instrument. And then there's the 5th stone. And this last one, well, it changes the purpose of all the others. You see, the point of these stones isn't just to build a few good habits. It's so much deeper than that. The goal is to create true alignment. It's about getting your body, your mind, and your spirit to finally stop fighting each other and start working together. To start playing in harmony, like they're all instruments in one single powerful symphony. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most crucial phase of his entire journey. Because what he learns is that true alignment, that inner peace, it's not something you're meant to just hoard for yourself. It's meant to be given away. Wow, this one insight just transforms everything for Elias. He realizes his whole personal journey through that miserable desert of distraction wasn't just about his own healing. It was his training ground. It was meant to equip him to go back and help other people find their way out of that same desert. And that is the 5th stone, the launching pad. The highest purpose of getting your own life in order is to turn your own stepping stones into a foundation, a platform that can launch other people into their purpose. The ultimate goal of all that difficult inward work is, in the end, outward service. So we end right back where we started with a question for you. The story of Elias Cross shows us that the very things we trip over every day, our fatigue, our bad habits, our distractions, they don't have to be our downfall. They can be transformed. They can become the actual foundational stones for a life of real purpose. The only question left is, what are you building with yours?